Okay. Well, thank you for joining from wherever you are, if it's morning, afternoon. It's so nice to see you all today. My name is Rachel Ryan. I am in our career development office here at Yale SOM. I've been here almost 7 years. Um, and I'd love to just turn it over to our fabulous panelists so that they can briefly introduce themselves as well. Would love to hear where you're from, where you studied, and what you did prior to SOM. So, Mariah, why don't you start?
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. My name is Mariah Smith. I am currently a second year full-time MBA here at SOM. Originally from Detroit, Michigan, and I studied at Michigan State University, where I was a communication major. And then prior to coming to SOM, I was working at Google.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, it's nice to meet you all. My name is June, and I'm also a second year full-time MBA student. I'm originally from San Jose, California. For my undergrad, I went to Carnegie Mellon University studying statistics and machine learning. After graduation, I worked 2.5 years or 3 years at Wayfair as a data engineer. And then I continued my career in the same role at Meta in their augmented reality division. Yeah.
Great. Thank you both. So I'll just give you all a very brief high-level overview of the Career Development Office and how we work within the tech universe, and then we'll jump into some questions. If at any point you have any questions, please just go ahead and enter your question into the Q&A feature within the webinar. And we'll make sure to go ahead and answer as many of those a little later in our time together. So just a little kind of background in terms of the Career Development Office here at SOM. There's a nice, pretty big team of us. I'm on the coaching team, as I mentioned earlier. We coach with students one-on-one, meeting about pretty much anything career related all year long, and actually all 2 years, and then additionally your time after SOM as well. We do alumni coaching as well. We work across all industries and functional areas, really any area of interest that you have. And sometimes those interests evolve during your time here, or you might be interested in a few different areas. And so it works quite well, the fact that we all coach across all areas. We also do have an entire team dedicated to developing employer relationships, really on your behalf. And one of those team members is entirely focused on the tech world. So we do have someone who's entirely dedicated to developing relationships with tech companies on behalf of SOM and all of you. So the other thing I just want to mention is that Mariah and June, while fantastic representatives of the entire experience recruiting within tech, they did both happen to pursue product management roles. And I just wanted to mention that every year we have many students who go into roles outside of product management as well. So if you're tuning in and have interest beyond product management, please note that's just one area. We have students who pursue opportunities and land roles in marketing and PMM, in strategy, in finance, HR, program management, operations, and the list really goes on. So tons of opportunities in other functional areas as well. And this is just kind of one area that they can speak to today. So with that, I'd love to just jump into some questions for you guys. So June, maybe we'll start with you. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to join SOM?
Yeah, definitely. So during the application process, I was looking through a lot of various schools across the US. And I think as my primary focus, I did want to stay in tech, but make the pivot, as Rachel kind of alluded to. There are a lot of folks who are interested in PM, and I was one of them. So I talked to several alums who had made that career pivot, whether they were coming in from tech or not. And I found that to be a warming experience. The other thing that really stood out to me with SOM was their as you know, one of their values is educating leaders for business and society. So there's that cross-industry focus. You know, it's not just people going into tech, consulting, or banking. There's a lot of emphasis on industries, whether it's in nonprofit or social impact. So I really was drawn into the fact that, you know, there are students coming in with a variety of interests. And there were other interests whether it was like energy that I was looking into during my admissions process. And I think Yale has that flexibility. And yeah, I really appreciate that it's also a very tight-knit, close community. Over the past year, I've gotten to develop a lot of great friends here. So it's been a great experience so far.
Great. Mariah?
Yeah, actually very similar to June. Coming from the tech industry, I really liked it. But when I was looking at schools, I had a very good inkling that I wanted to stay in tech, but I wasn't exactly sure if that was going to be the place that I landed. And so I liked the flexibility that Yale had, where they had a very strong tech program, but they also had a lot of other things that I was interested in. So to what June mentioned, like the flexibility was really huge. But then I think the other big piece for me that kind of sealed the deal was the people. Just everyone that I talked to during the process, regardless of if they were pursuing tech paths or not, everyone was just like very helpful. And like, if they didn't know a question, they would like put me in touch with somebody who might have an answer. And so that process for me was kind of what was like the final choice for me of making me feel like Yale was the place I wanted to go.
Thank you. Can you both talk a little bit about where you interned this past summer, and as it stands now, what are your career goals for after graduation? Mariah, we can start with you.
Yeah, love to. So this summer I was a product manager intern for American Express. I really wanted to see, kind of as I mentioned, I wanted to know what tech was like outside of like your normal tech companies. And so for me, I was really interested in pursuing like something in fintech, but I was really open. And so I ended up at American Express, which I loved. And I thought that they were a very good mix of like a tech company, but also a financial institution. And so I thought the culture there was really good. And as of now, my plans for after graduation is I'll actually be returning to American Express in New York City as a product manager.
Cool. And yeah, as for myself, I was, as Rachel mentioned, I was interning also as a product manager. I was interning at HP at their Houston office, specifically supporting one of the software teams that supports other engineering and developer teams within HP. I really enjoyed the experience. I think it was all that I was looking for as far as a PM role goes. But I think in terms of the team and the company, I don't think there was an alignment in terms of the culture that I was looking for and like the type of work. Or yeah, but yeah, at the moment, I'm currently looking to target smaller companies or perhaps even a startup, but in a similar function.
Can you also both talk about the career resources here that you found to be the most helpful? June, we can start with you.
Yeah, so obviously there's the career development office. So when I first came into SOM, I had a conversation with one of the career coaches and really sat down with her for almost an hour or so, just understanding from her side, like what I'm looking for, what my strong suits are. And she kind of helped me understand, like, these are some of the skills that you should highlight in your resume. This is kind of how you should be deliberate with your search. Here are some ways you can think of identifying your target companies. So that's been really helpful. Another aspect that Rachel mentioned is that, you know, students also go to the career development office to get practice with interview skills, whether it's with behaviorals. Another resource that I found was in the technology club, which I happen to lead. Last year, I think there was a lot of great resources, especially through the second years students. They really helped create this curriculum that helped students prepare all parts of the interview, whether it's from reviewing your resume, going through behaviorals, or going through some more the so-called technical cases. But just having those conversations throughout the year was really helpful in helping me land my internship.
Yeah, for me, I think Tech Club was probably my biggest resource last year. And so Tech Club has like two parts. One is like a curriculum where it kind of talks about different roles within the industry. But the second part that you can join into is a case team. And so June and I were actually on the same tech case team last year. And so you got a lot of practice doing like behavioral interviews, case style interviews. And we used, I believe Rocket Blocks is one of the softwares that's available that we can like pull questions from previous companies. And so I thought that was like a really good firsthand experience. And then I also think the second year is last year, both in Tech Club and without, were a very big resource because you were able to talk to people and learn about their internships, learn like what hiring practices were at different companies, timelines. And so it was really nice to have kind of a pulse of what had happened in just the year right before us. And so I think Tech Club was probably my biggest career resource last year.
June, anything else you want to expand on when it comes to Tech Club specifically and kind of what you do within Tech Club, the kind of resources that you offer students?
Yeah, as Mariah mentioned, one of our biggest resources is the curriculum and case teams. So I think that's been one of the most helpful resources that we provide to students, especially for the first years as they're recruiting for their internships. On my side, I've been doing a lot of work with the career aspect. So I actually meet with Rachel and Brian, who's on the employee partnership program, just to stay up to date with some of the employers that are targeting MBA and SOM students, whether it is in internships or full-time roles. So just helping surface those up to students. We also have a lot of panelists come in, whether they are SOM alums or other professionals that come in, just talk about their companies, their teams, their work, what it's like to pivot into tech. So that's been another way to just hear from someone else about their experience. This past year, we restarted our tech trek, which was in the Bay Area. So we had the opportunity to visit companies like Google, C3AI, Salesforce. And then we also had one in New York just this past month where we got to visit Meta and IBM. So that's been a really great experience for students to get an in-person experience of what it's like to work in these tech companies.
Yeah, and you guys did a great job planning that. And I also want to expand on some of the resources. Mariah, I know had mentioned Rocket Blocks, which yes, the CDO does provide access to Rocket Blocks. We also provide access to a tech-specific tool called Exponent. So plenty of resources available. There was a question that came in about pivoting. And the specific question was, if a student is trying to pivot in multiple ways, maybe it's industry, geography, function, what are your thoughts on pivoting? Like, do you like to do you recommend pivoting in stages? Can sometimes you pivot entirely? I'm happy to chime in on this as well, but Mariah, maybe if you have any insight on this, we could start there.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think anything is possible, right? Like you can always pivot and do something else. I do think that when you are looking, at least in my opinion, I think if you are targeting like big name companies, it can sometimes be easier to pivot in stages, because a lot of times they are looking for some sort of transferable skill. And so you kind of maybe want to start in one area. So maybe it's function, like maybe you've done something similar. So for instance, before coming to SOM, I was working in product operations, which is not product management, but kind of tangential. And so could use a little bit of that to try to transition into product management. But if you want to do like a double pivot of like function and industry, like I said, everything is possible. Don't count it out. But depending on the company that you're going for, going in stages, and maybe like starting off somewhere at a team and then doing a second pivot might help you get your foot in the door faster.
June, anything you want to add there? Should we continue on?
Yeah, I think echo what Mariah said. I think the only other thing is, yeah, to Mariah's point, like I've seen more commonly just a single pivot, whether it is in the function or the company. When I talk to a lot of the SOM alums and other professionals, they had given the advice, you know, if you're looking for a company, as Mariah said, perhaps look into roles that closely align with your prior experiences and see where your skills and what the company's looking for match. And then if it's for a specific role, you should, you know, think about having a broad reach of companies that you're looking for. Maybe there were companies that you didn't think of coming into business school that really drew your interest. So really just broadening your set of target companies was a really helpful mindset to consider.
Can I just echo that? I think broadening your companies is big. So American Express was not on my initial list when I came in. I wasn't necessarily thinking of them as like the tech space. But as I started to do more research, I actually discovered a whole like plethora of companies that weren't on my initial list. And so I think just like it's good to come in with things that you like want to go after, but then like let yourself be open and flexible to like other opportunities that may arise.
That's great. Totally agree with those points. There was a question that came in about students who don't have tech backgrounds that might also have an interest in tech. Are there courses that you guys have found helpful while here or resources across the university that you think are helpful to tap into? Anything you want to share there?
I can go. Yeah, I think that it's possible to still transition in, and I feel like we see it happen all the time. One of my roles here at SOM as a student is actually I serve on our student government as our career development person, and I'm a career advisor. And so one of the things that I talk to a lot of people about is transferable skills. And so, you know, no matter the industry that you're coming from, like let's say you were a consultant before, you probably have a lot of like strategic thinking, you're able to like problem solve, like look into the future. Those are all things that you can like reuse on your resume for tech roles as well. And so I think like really just lean into the skills that you have. And a lot of times those can be transferable. And then I think for classes, one of my favorite classes that I've enjoyed while being here, it's now called Generative AI and Social Media. But for me, I didn't have any coding experience. And so this was like an intro to learning Python. But the means of doing that were using AI and artificial intelligence, and then also being able to not just code, but also do like data analytics and scraping. And so I found it to be like very useful and like very real world applicable. And that was probably my favorite tech class so far.
Yeah, aside from the CDO and the tech club, as Mariah mentioned, there are a couple courses. I took product management last spring, which was really helpful for my internship, just understanding like, you know, how do you think about the customer? How do you segment them? Like, what are their needs? And then how do you translate those into solutions or product features? So I would look through a couple of my notes actually during the internship to really help me with some of my projects. Beyond that, there are some core classes. If you go through the SOM website, I think customer, which is the equivalent of like an introduction to marketing class, which really emphasizes on understanding who the customers are. I think that was a really great class for me. We also have technical classes that are offered within SOM. So I'm currently taking large language models, which is really great. It goes in depth into like the math behind the models, some of the applications. We also have management and software development and database systems, which are also popular courses. Given my prior experiences, I chose not to take those, but I've heard really great feedback about those courses. The other great thing I think about SOM is that you're not just limited to the classes within the business school. You have the opportunity to take classes in the greater university. So I know a couple of my classmates are taking classes at the engineering school, and they offer a lot of CS classes there as well.
There were some questions that came in touching on how the Career Development Office specifically helps support in these areas. So I guess it might be helpful to just know that we start working with students over the summer before they arrive. And we're working with you on a bunch of different topics related to your search. Probably one of the areas we focus on most over the summer is getting your resume ready so that way you don't have to worry about it once you're here. We also work with you on how to tell your personal story. We do all different kinds of workshops with you when you initially start. We work with you at orientation. We facilitate tons of exploratory conversations with second years when you're first here. Lots of individual coaching appointments that start in the summer, and those are not limited in any way. You can meet with as many coaches as you want, as many times as you want while you're here. And as I mentioned, after you leave as well. We do offer a number of recruiting events that are specific to tech that our employer partner works and partners with the employer on having like an SOM specific event. Many tech companies also just approach recruiting in that they host events that are open to all students everywhere. And we also have many students who have very specific areas of interest at smaller companies such as startups that may not have like dedicated MBA recruiting of any kind, but they are able to build relationships, whether it be through alumni or just the networking process. A huge area of focus that we work with you on is how to network and how to build relationships to ultimately accomplish your career goals. So there are a lot of different ways the CDO supports mock interviewing, helping to think through negotiating, basically anything career related we work with you on. So hopefully that answers that. There was another question I just want to touch on about which companies offer opportunities outside of product management. It's a very long list. I might recommend even just poking around LinkedIn, getting a sense of different students, their backgrounds. You can also check out information on our employment report, but tons of tech employers offer opportunities outside of product management, such as strategy, operations, marketing, the list, all the functional areas that I'd mentioned earlier. Let's go to a question that I know came in about how you guys have used the alumni network. Do either of you want to talk about that, how you've leveraged the alumni network at SOM?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first about that. So even since by my first year at SOM, the alumni have been very receptive to just outreach. We do have obviously LinkedIn, but then SOM has their own internal network called SOM Connect, which connects the students to the broader SOM community. And I found that to be really helpful. But for the most part with my outreaches, the SOM alums have been very receptive. They've been willing to take coffee chats from like 30 minutes to an hour and really share their experience at their companies, their career pivots, and so forth. As I mentioned, I organized a trek to New York at the Meta and IBM offices. So I did a few outreach to some alums there, and they were really helpful in setting those events up. I'm also planning one in the Bay Area for this upcoming January, and the alums I've worked with have also been really, really helpful there.
I've also had a lot of good receptiveness from people on LinkedIn, especially when looking for internships and trying to like better understand companies. I reached out to quite a few, both SOM alums and just Yale alums, and had a pretty good like response from most of them. A lot of them like as June said, we're very willing to set up like time to chat, coffee chat, sometimes even like a follow-up, especially if I was moving forward on a process and I was like, oh, I want to get another like idea, they'd introduce me to somebody else. And so far I've found the alumni like very receptive and very welcoming, and just like they are excited to like answer your questions and like to help out.
And having been here a while, I can just add that while, of course, there's an especially close relationship with other SOM alumni, the broad university alumni network can also be quite helpful. And I've seen students build relationships with graduates from the broader university outside of just SOM that has proven to be quite helpful to them. There was a question about and society and just the general mission. How has that shaped your experience within, tech club, pursuing tech opportunities? How do you see that come to life at SOM?
I can start.
Yeah.
I think the business and society piece of SOM is kind of like core and integral to it. And I don't think it's just like a buzzword that's thrown around. I actually think it's like woven throughout our curriculum and our opportunities. And so I think for me, on a like and society level, I think no matter what you're going out in the world to do, whether it's like tech or something else, you are like gonna be a member of society and like a leader. And so when I think of it from a tech perspective, so much of technology affects society and the uses of it. And so I look at it as of a chance of like, yes, I'm in tech, but I'm also like in this opportunity to build for kind of the rest of the world. And you need to take in like diverse perspectives, and you need to understand like different elements. And so for me, that's kind of where like the and society piece comes in. It's like it's a holistic overview of how you're going to continue to like be a leader in these spaces, no matter the industry.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to also add that we have a lot of clubs that make that emphasis as well. Not just Tech Club, but we have Tech and Society, which actually just formally became a club this year, and they have a lot of great discussions and topics around using technology and AI responsibly. I think it's also, as Mariah mentioned, it's woven into a lot of other resources, especially with some of our courses. Like right now, I'm taking crisis management in tech, which is actually taught by a former chief information officer from IBM. And a lot of the discussions there are about how, former, like really big crisis in tech could have been prevented, or, how could these companies have responded better? So I think just understanding the societal impacts is really something that's, I think, critical in today's world, especially with the bigger companies as they're being scrutinized really heavily. And I think organically too, when you're just engaging with your other classmates and just sharing, what's up in the world in the tech industry, I think it comes up a lot. So yeah, I think it's a very integral part of SOM.
Yep. And I saw within that question too, there was mention of being interested in trust and safety roles, and we absolutely have students who pursue those roles. So that's another area, and I hadn't mentioned it earlier, but it's absolutely part of kind of the job search ecosystem, I'll call it. Great. There's a question about how structured is tech recruitment at SOM, and how soon the SOM internship process starts. And I would say while there is some pre-MBA recruiting that can sometimes happen, such as Forte or Consortium or just other groups, on the whole, you do have some time to get settled when you come here and do some initial exploration. Usually formal kind of informational events and coffee chats don't start until later in September. And even then, while applications can sometimes start on the earlier side, I would say a majority of interviewing happens after winter break, to kind of give you a sense. Though that being said, there are areas that are very structured when you're pursuing an MBA, such as management consulting and investment banking. Tech, I would say, is much less structured than that. You might have one employer interview a candidate in January, and that same employer might interview a candidate months later. All the companies follow different timelines. And, some candidate experiences vary even within that same employer. Anything you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, I can add to that as Rachel mentioned with some specifics like, this past year, I think a lot of the bigger tech companies, they're a little bit more structured. So I think their timelines tend to be a little bit earlier. So I know for Microsoft, for instance, they opened up their openings for internships in September. Amazon was, I think around, actually it's happening right now. Whereas smaller companies, they tend to do like just-in-time hiring around like March and April. With me and me at HP, I think their roles opened up in November and December, and I had my interview and offer in February. So it is all over the place, but I think it really depends on, what companies you're targeting and seeing what their timelines are at the beginning of the school year.
What impressed or surprised you the most about your SOM classmates? I love that question.
I think this is gonna sound cliche, but I think the and society piece. I think that a lot of the people here are truly passionate about lots of different things, including like world issues, climate change, but also just things that are like very personal to them. And I think being surrounded by people that like are so passionate and want to see like good in the world all the time was a shocker for me. It's not that I didn't think that that would happen, but I was just surprised to see that like most people that I interact with kind of like held that sort of like common good belief, which goes to my earlier point of how I don't think the in society piece is like just a buzzword. I think it is actually like a very core part. And then the people that we end up coming here tend to like play a role in that as well. And so that was like very shocking to me, but in the best way possible.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a little bit similar in terms of like how diverse the school is, both professionally and geographically. I think SOM is one of the more international schools, or we have a lot of folks coming in internationally. We also have programs within the business school, like the global business studies and the advanced management programs, where it just brings in more diversity demographically. And it's just, I think on top of that too, people are very down to earth, whether it's just in terms of like like the conversations you have. So I think that's been very warming to just have people that you're comfortable speaking with and just being yourself. So it's been a great experience.
Building on the experience, there's a question, how do you think getting an MBA has changed you as a person beyond the professional world? Do either of you have anything to speak to with that?
That's such a good question. I'm like trying to think beyond just classroom, but I think overall it's made me like a more holistic thinker. And I think that my hope is that post MBA, I'm able to always continue to take a lot of different perspectives into play. And that doesn't have to be in a professional setting, but just like how I guess I live my life. And I think on the other thing I'll say is sometimes when you are like working and maybe you've been working for a while, or maybe you haven't, you get like very used to like maybe the corporate culture. And so I think the MBA is a great like educational experience, but it's also a good reminder to like have fun, and like do things that make you happy. And so that's like something else that I've like gotten from this.
I think for me, just going through the classes and also just talking with my classmates, I think I feel like I've been more empathetic with everyone because like people bring in diverse perspectives. So and those were things that there are a lot of different ideas that I really never considered before. So I think just like it's made me a bit more open-minded of how I approach different topics and discussions. Another area I would say is it's helped me be more confident in my own ideas and actions, especially since there's a lot of ways you can get involved in the community. It also puts you in a spot where you're able to lead your own ideas, and I think I've had a lot of ways to. I've had the fortunate opportunity to contribute in many ways, and yeah, I think that's helped build my confidence as well.
With the rigorous coursework schedule, how do you find time for extracurricular activities, and what extracurricular activities have you participated in?
I can start that off. So yeah, beyond the tech club and other professional clubs, I'm part of SOM United. So we actually have like pickup games throughout the week. Earlier this semester, we also had a intramural league with the other grad programs every Sunday. So that's been a fun experience. And then we also just have hangouts with other classmates, whether it's in downtown or like at someone's own house. As far as balancing between like the courses and everything else, yeah, SOM United is our soccer club. I should have mentioned that before, but as far as balancing goes, I think it really depends on the person. There are a lot of students who really focus on the classes. There are others that focus or try to find a balance of like, doing what's needed and then putting their other effort and time into clubs or just hanging out with their friends. I think I'm in that middle where I try to find a fine line of like, what's the amount where I can still learn a lot from my classes, but also try to have some fun, because I think, it's as far as being at business school goes, you should think of it holistically. Like you're obviously there to learn, but you're also there to connect with your classmates and also just have a great experience.
Yeah. I think prioritization can be hard sometimes, like especially in your first year. Your classes are a little bit more like dictated in terms of like what you're taking and like when you're taking it. And so there can just be a lot of pressure sometimes if you're entering in this new situation. You're trying to learn like the building, the people, and also do class and extracurriculars. So I think that sometimes can be harder, but to June's point, it's kind of you choose like what you prioritize and when, and maybe one week it's like, I'm prioritizing social more, and maybe another week it's like academics. I think for me, coming into my second year, it's been a little bit more relaxed because you get to pick your classes and your schedule. And so, I don't know, I may have overcommitted to extracurriculars this year, maybe as compensation for last year. But I'm currently a captain for our hockey club. I'm in our wine club. I'm also a leader for Black Business Association, or BBA, as we call it. And those I would think are like the three main things that I have been spending time on outside of class this year.
There was a question about if you can pursue multiple interests at the same time from a professional perspective. So for example, consulting and tech, or a bunch of different types of industry interests. or functional interests? And the answer is absolutely yes. I think it's super common. It makes complete sense. I think that's where individual coaching appointments can be particularly helpful because we can talk to you about what your personal priorities are and help you to kind of think through your search strategy and how you structure that in a way that's more manageable. There are certain opportunities that might be difficult to pursue at the same time, but on the whole, almost all of them, it's very doable. It's just a matter of kind of how you structure it, how you prioritize, and what you're trying to achieve. So we work with you on that. But no, you absolutely do not need to come in and just kind of declare a major, if you will. Like you come in and you can pursue all different kinds of opportunities. We have some students who are really motivated by a specific location, or maybe they're interested in finding a specific type of culture, regardless of the industry. So there are a lot of different ways that searches can be structured, and you don't need to pick just one area of interest at all. In fact, we really encourage you to broaden your search and kind of be open-minded and take some time to explore, which I think Mariah and June spoke to earlier. Let's see. Anything specific from the classroom that you felt like you were able to really apply professionally, maybe in your internship or anything like that? We saw a few questions come through that touched on that.
Yeah, I think I spoke of a couple classes. Obviously, like product management was very directly related to what I was working on in terms of my internship. And I was doing a lot of like interviews with the customers, and it was like internal teams within HP. So I think just like going through that course of understanding like how do you set up relevant questions, like identify the priorities and significant needs. I find learning those concepts in the classroom was very directly relevant to what I was working on over the summer. Same goes for the customer class that I mentioned earlier as well. I think from a longer horizon, there's other courses. I think executive, for instance, it talks about how you should think about various stakeholders within a company, and we heard from a lot of other like executives perspectives. So I think we had the prior owner of Chicago Fire come in and talk to us about like, what it was like, moving the team stadium. I think we also heard from one of the executives over at Deloitte talk about his own personal experience and how he manages different stakeholders, but also aligns with the various teams within his org. So I think from that class too, just thinking, beyond just your immediate role after graduation, but thinking more, as you are managing an entire team or even a company, what that's like. So I found that really helpful as well.
Yeah, for me, customer was also on my list, but another class that I found really helpful this summer from our core curriculum was innovator. And it's interesting because during the curriculum, basically the class is you are essentially an entrepreneur, you come up with a new idea and you kind of go through like a very small process of like what that would look like interviews, basically testing the idea, that sort of thing in like a short span of time. And I remember taking it and I thought it was interesting, but I was like, oh, I'm not interested in entrepreneurship. Like this doesn't really like apply. But then this summer, the project that I was working on was essentially doing like a gap analysis and trying to figure out, should we enter a new market and with what product? And so I got to take a lot of those innovator skills to think about like, okay, what's the market we're going after? What sort of things like would work? And then similarly, like as I talked to other teams within the company, figuring out like what people had done before, what they hadn't. And so I felt like I actually was able to take a lot of those skills kind of in a different way. But I guess that goes to also to show that sometimes the curriculum may appear one way and then you may see it like on the longer horizon kind of show up again. And I thought that was really cool.
For our last question, I'm going to ask both of you, what advice do you have for candidates preparing to apply to SOM? What do you wish you had known when you were applying? June, maybe we'll start with you.
I would say maybe this isn't just specific to SOM, but all MBA applications, I would just say like take some time to relax. I know it's like a very stressful process, just considering the schools that you're applying to and then working on the applications and then also studying for the GMAT or GRE if you're taking that. Because it is a very long process. As far as SOM goes, I think as we've touched on a couple of times during this meeting, there is a heavy emphasis on business and society within SOM. So reflecting on your prior experiences, how you've kind of touched on both in your professional or academic experiences. I think that's something that SOM really values in the students.
Yeah, I fully echo all of that. I think to add another perspective to this, I would also say like, whether it's SOM or any other school that you're thinking about, like talk to as many people as you can. Like reach out to students, like that is going to be your window into like the school, the environment, and trying to understand like, is this a place that you see yourself? Do you see yourself like thriving in this environment? And so I think you can only really get that through talking to people and hearing a lot of different experiences and perspectives. And then I would also say someone that I talked to when I was in this position told me, when you come into business school, you should come in with your career thinking of it as like a hypothesis that you want to test. So like have 2 to 3 industries or jobs or functions that you're interested in, and then kind of use your time here, especially your first few weeks, to like test and see if you actually still are really interested in them, or and leave room for other things. And so I think it's really important that as you think about your career to be open. I think sometimes if you like don't have anything that you're trying to test, it can be very overwhelming because everything is a possibility, which is why I say like try to have like 2 to 3 things that you're like interested in. And then that list can evolve and that's completely fine. But you can at least say, I tried this. I went to this club. I don't think that's for me. I'm going to cross this off the list. And then maybe you add another one. So just being open to all the new like experiences that you'll also see once you set foot on a campus.
Great. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate all of your insight and perspective. And for everyone joining, thanks so much. We hope we get the chance to work with you in the near future. Good luck with the process and have a great weekend.